So it's the first Sunday of May, which means we're on step 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Fear and shame are feelings that will prevent you from doing a step 5, or cause you to leave out things, or to do half measures on your step 5. When we first come into the program, we are desperate, and we say that we will go to any length to get clean and sober. It's funny, not in a ha-ha kind of way, but it's funny that by the time we get to steps 4 and 5, we may have a few weeks or a few months of sobriety under our belt, and we are starting to feel better, and we start taking back our will and running our own program. So in what ways do we do that? Maybe by delaying, taking months or even years to complete our step 4, and then making excuses for not booking our step 5, or waiting months or even years to do our step 5. What holds us back? It can be addict or alcoholic behavior, such as procrastination. It can be a character defect, such as laziness. It can be relapse behaviors, such as thinking, I don't need to do this, I'm different, I'm doing fine, or any number of other excuses that we'll use to avoid doing the work. We often hear people coming back off a relapse say, I relapsed because I quit going to meetings. And while it's nice that they recognize the importance of going to meetings, it's just not true. People relapse because they either do not even start working a program, hoping that hanging out in meeting rooms will keep them sober, or because they stop working a program. And many stop or fall down at steps 4 and 5. Now, I often hear things like this. People will say to me, I'm working on my step 4. And then the next time I see them, they might say, I'm finishing up my step 4. And then the next time I see them, they'll say, I've been trying to get together with my sponsor to go over my step 4. And then the next time I see them, they'll say, I'm just about finished my step 4. And the next time I see them, they say, I've got it done, but I'm trying to decide who to do my step 5 with. Then the next time I see them, they might say, I need to get my step 5 booked. Then the next time I see them, they say, I remembered some things that I forgot to put in my step 4. And then the next time I see them, they say, well, I've got it booked for next month. And the next time I see them, they say, something came up and I had to cancel it, so I'm going to have to rebook it. Excuses and relapse behavior because they are not working their program. Step 5 is like a confession, and the practice of confession is an ancient one. It's been around for centuries in various forms in religion, and more recently in therapy. Acknowledgement and discussion of our flaws is how we improve. Unless we are able to be introspective, deeply introspective, we cannot change. And sharing our confession is about breaking out of shame and cultivating humility. The process of cultivating humility involves clearly and completely acknowledging our deficiencies. We need to understand who we are, and step 5 is part of that process. The 2 most important character traits one must develop in order to be successful in the 12-step program, and in fact, I believe in life, are honesty and humility. Now make no mistake about it. Lying by omission in your step 5 is lying. And when we rationalize or justify our lies, we are on the road to relapse. When I hear step 5s, when the person is done their sharing, I always ask this question: what is the one deep, dark secret that you have told yourself that you would never tell anybody, the one that you said that you would take to your grave? And the reason I ask that is because the ugly ones, the ones that we are too ashamed to talk about, are the ones that will take us out. They're the ones that fill us with the most shame and keep us locked there, thinking, what kind of person am I that I would do such a thing? Or, I'm a horrible person, and this is not true. And if we don't bring it out into the light of day, it will haunt us. These secrets will show up in our dreams, and we will drag them around like a 1,000-pound weight. We will be a slave to the secret. We may even find that we will struggle in our sobriety, in relationships, and in life in general because we are carrying the rock, the secret. And remember, our secrets keep us sick. A saying often attributed to Shakespeare is, "The truth shall set you free." But this statement was first recorded in the Bible and spoken by Jesus. In John chapter 8, verses 31 to 32, Jesus said, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Now this is a slightly different context, and Jesus goes on to say, "I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin." In like manner, we are a slave to the things we have done wrong until our confession, our step 5, and then we are freed. The problem, however, is found in this quote by James Garfield. Garfield says, "The truth shall set you free, but first it will make you miserable." The truth is that we have done some things we aren't proud of, some of which we're downright ashamed of, and some we thought we would never tell anybody that we had done. When we do our step 5, or whether we do our step 5 or not, these things happened, and they are true and need to be disclosed. And knowing these truths and not disclosing them makes us miserable. Sometimes we're miserable consciously and sometimes subconsciously. We come face to face with the reality and the misery of the wrongs that we have done when we do our step 4, and often worry about telling those secrets, and we try to find ways to get out of it. Now, I've been guilty of and witnessed to all kinds of mental aerobics designed to help us get out of our step 5. And the best one I've heard is this. I'd like to share it with you. A gentleman came to me and said, "So I have to admit my wrongs to God, myself, and another human being, right?" "Right," I said. So he went on, he said, "So God came to earth in the human form as Jesus. So if I admit my wrongs to myself, God, and Jesus, I've done my step 5, right?" See what I mean about the mental aerobic? This guy was pretty creative, but I didn't let him off the hook. So there are numerous reasons why we have to do our step 5 with another human being. But the greatest is because we have become experts at deluding ourselves. A fellow human being with years of sobriety or professional expertise will prevent us from getting off track or minimizing and rationalizing. And he or she will also offer guidance and suggestions. I said at the start, fear and shame are the two feelings that will keep us from doing a complete step 5, or sometimes from either even attempting one. Fear and shame are cousins. We often find them hanging around together. And you probably know me well enough by now to know that I'm going to work in something about feelings into just about every message that I do. So fear and shame have amazing gifts for us, but only if we allow ourselves to feel them and to sit in those feelings. The feeling of fear has a gift for us, and that gift is wisdom. We are most often fearful when thinking about our step 5 or getting ready to do our step 5 because we are afraid that the person we choose to hear it may think less of us or judge us for our actions. We learn as we go through this healing process that that isn't the case. We feel relief, we feel supported and understood. So we have gained wisdom from doing the very thing that we have been fearing, the thing that has been keeping us in slavery. Our scripture tonight is a beautiful illustration of how we may fear judgment and how we don't need to, even as those who are hearing our step fives have their own shortcomings, because they have things which they have confessed, and they have walked, at least to some extent, in the shoes in which we are walking. Our scripture is from the book of John, chapter 8, verses 3 to 11, from the New Living Translation. As he was speaking, and this is talking about Jesus, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." The fear of doing our step five keeps us trapped in the shame of being publicly condemned. The person we do our step five with must understand, like Jesus did with the Jewish leaders, that we all fall short of the mark. There is much speculation and many theories about what Jesus wrote with his finger in the sand for the Jewish leaders to see. Some believe that he was writing the Pharisees' names and possibly their sins. This theory is based primarily on the Old Testament book of Jeremiah, chapter 17, verse 13, which says that he might be fulfilling one of the Old Testament prophecies from Jeremiah. Maybe it was what he wrote, or maybe it was simply what he said. All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Had there been even one among them who had never sinned, the stoning could have begun, but there wasn't. In our programs, we are told only to take our own inventories, not those of others. This is what Jesus was telling the Pharisees. And then he went on to say to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." What a beautiful message. Neither do I. Jesus did not condemn her, and he doesn't condemn you. And neither will the person you share your step five with. Doug, could I have the slide there now, please? So fear of what we're told is the next step in our program, and some would say the most important one, prevents us from doing the thing which we need to do the most. The other feeling is shame. And while the big book tells us that fear is an evil and corroding thread in our behaviors, I believe that when it comes to step five, it is toxic shame that is the big one. The greatest human wound the one that we all carry at some level, is the belief that I am not good enough, that there is something wrong with me, that I don't measure up. And it isn't true. You see, in God's eyes, you don't have to measure up. You are loved for who you are, not what you do, and not for what you have done. Just as all the good deeds you do here on earth cannot make God love you anymore, all the bad things you might have done cannot make God love you any less. And I'm reminded when I say that of when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, and he came up out of the water and heard God's voice saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And that message was not only for Jesus, but for all of us. And I'm reminded too of the story of the prodigal son, the son who went away and squandered his inheritance, fell into disrepute, lost all of his money, and found himself eating with the pigs, came home to his father, who represents our Father, our higher power, and was loved for who he was, not for what he had done, just as his brother who had stayed behind was loved the same way. I said earlier that the two most important characteristics which will ensure our success in our programs and in life are honesty and humility. Humility is the gift of shame. When we are able to break out of our shame and share our story, including our shortcomings with others, we become more humble. Our ego is brought down to size, and the pretense is gone. Shame loves the dark, because that is where secrets live. So we have to bring them out into the light of day to release their enslaving hold. And that is what step 5 is all about. The reason that I say fear and shame are cousins is because we all have a great amount of fear around talking about the things which keep us in slavery to our shame. Speaking about shame and shameful behaviors of our past requires vulnerability. And being vulnerable is one of life's most terrifying experiences. It requires feeling. And the thing that we have been trying to do most of our lives is to avoid feeling. And vulnerability requires trust, and most of all, courage. But interestingly, the thing we fear the most, that people will judge us and run away, doesn't happen. In fact, the opposite does. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, people are drawn to us because we are courageous enough to embrace our fear and the shame and to touch our own deepest wound. And it allows others to do the same. Are the risks of being vulnerable huge? Absolutely. But the rewards are beyond your wildest dreams.